What's up, Mac Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of The Bride, the new Gothic romance film from Maggie Gyllenhaal, starring Jessie, Buckley, and Christian Bale. This comes as Maggie Gyllenhaal's third feature film. This comes to us as Gyllenhaal's third directorial feature, her first since The Lost Daughter from a few years back, and this film has gone through numerous delays and rumors of production issues and poor testing. The film was delayed from a fall release last year into early March. And of course, that's a noticeable delay given the kind of dumping ground this time of the calendar usually works for films, but also because the star of The Bride, Jessie Buckley, is almost assuredly about to win Best Actress for her role in Hamnet. She has completely swept and dominated every precursor award in the Best Actress field this award season. And it's quite noticeable that she's starring in a massive bomb for Warner Brothers as The Bride opened both domestically and internationally to very low box office figures, well below even the pessimistic tracking. Is this going to be a Norbit situation where Eddie Murphy doesn't win the Oscar for Dreamgirls after being the favorite at one point? No, certainly not. Buckley's still going to win. But this is certainly a bit of a stinker. Going into The Bride with really low expectations given the poor buzz, I was pleasantly surprised at how many things within the movie I was intrigued by and appreciated, while still concluding that the movie doesn't completely work. The Bride of Frankenstein story has been adapted many times, and the idea of taking that story to 1930s Chicago and making a pseudo-noir film, an intriguing spin to say the least. It's hard not to get away from this film's very close proximity to Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein from just a few months back. There's a lot to compare and contrast between the Jacob Elordi performance in that movie and Christian Bale this time around. Frankly, it's just nice to see Bale, given he hasn't acted all that much recently. Buckley's really going for it, and that performance helps push The Bride to the finish line, even if I think screenplay and structure-wise, there's just a lot of issues and things that are not developed well enough. As I was watching the movie, I couldn't help but think of Damien Chazelle's Babylon, just in terms of the film's bombast and everything it had going on. Visually, it certainly harkens back to the Joker films, sharing a DP, sharing a composer. But when you watch the movie, this feels more like a Joker Folie à Deux situation, another infamous bomb. So as you watch the movie again, I think the production design, it works well. You know, that 1930s vibe, just kind of being old-timey like that, I think was pretty fun and cool. And there's a recurring motif in this movie where Frankenstein, played by Bale, Frankenstein's monster, I should say, Frankenstein's monster, played by Bale, or Frank, wants to go to the movies. He's a huge movie fan. He goes to the cinema and rewatches stuff over and over again. And Jake Gyllenhaal, actually, of course, brother of the director here, plays a movie star that Frank is watching on screen all the time. And as our plot progresses and our characters move around the Midwest, they go to different cinemas, and it's kind of a recurring bit. And I think there's some fun meta commentary there for big movie fans, I suppose. When Buckley's character Ida is brought back to life, she develops this permanent stain on her face that definitely works for a cool visual. Bale's Frankenstein's monster, definitely a different visual from Jacob Elordi's, for sure. You know, I think of the early appearance of Elordi in the Del Toro movie and how kind of smoothed out and geometric he looked in terms of that design. It's not like that. There's definitely more of a traditional one. Bale's still pretty prosthetic up, but he's able to, act a good amount. You can still see his face move and things like that. So I think overall, design-wise, I kind of like everything going on there. And there are some really striking visuals because Buckley also gets to play Mary Shelley herself, the, of course, author of Frankenstein. There's these kind of interstitial scenes, dream sequence-esque scenes. Some of the visuals are really stark and flashy, where Ida's almost having an internal monologue with Mary Shelley herself. It's definitely intriguing. And again, these are some of the aspects that are kind of uneven in the movie. Ultimately, I think the core plot of The Bride was entertaining enough. It's very Bonnie and Clyde as these two forlorn lovers kind of come together and develop into lovers and then kind of go on the run because Frank is used to, at this point, being a monster and having to exist outside the periphery of society. And I think the idea of a adult Frankenstein's monster just kind of existing in 30s Chicago and tiptoeing around things like that's kind of interesting, right? You don't really get a ton of it in the movie, but the idea of a Frankenstein's monster post Dr. Frankenstein, And of course, now he wants a bride. He wants some kind of companion who understands his pain. But like that kind of idea of how he would exist culturally, it would have been cool if that was tugged on a little bit. Unfortunately, the bride is really bogged down with a few things that just don't really work. There's this whole subplot with the police investigation of the crimes and the crimes, both alleged and real, that Ida and Frank get up to. And there's a detective and her colleague, played by Penelope Cruz and Peter Sarsgaard, and there's a whole aspect of Sarsgaard having to kind of take all the credit and get the doors opened, even though Penelope Cruz's character is actually the true smart detective. But of course, she's held back by the sexist attitudes of the time. And alongside that, you have Ida inspiring kind of a feminist revolution of sorts in the country. And these women are marking their face, a la the stain that she has, and crying out brain rot, rallying cry, and trying to take back some gender rights and things like that. And it's just not developed enough, not nearly consistent enough, right? So I think ultimately the movie just really kind of runs out of gas. It's quite long in the end, and there's a whole other subplot about the Italian mob who is cutting off the tongues of women involved with their various people so they can't talk, and we learn about Ida's backstory, and that's even thinner than everything else that we see. So it's like, I liked the performances. I liked how, particularly Buckley, I liked how out there she was. She was kind of jump into monologue and do different voices and stuff. It was wild. That's kind of what you want from a role like this, right? Some Harley Quinn energy in there, but just like screenplay wise, it's just way too overstuffed, and all those other elements are not, effective. And that betting solid enough as the doctor who resurrects Ida, and Frank, confides in getting her to get to that point. You also have Jeannie Berlin as the doctor's maid in those scenes. But yeah, ultimately the bride will certainly come and go down as a big bomb. I mean, opening sub $10 million at the domestic box office when your budget is close to $100 million is a huge flop. And when you equal that total internationally as well, there's just no hope for the movie. And this certainly concludes the winning streak that Warner Brothers has had at the box office. Of course, they were truly spectacular in 2025. And that's not to say that Warner Brothers didn't have non-home runs at the box office last year. Of course, The Alto Nights was a big disappointment, albeit that was more of a David Zaslav-driven decision. And Mickey 17, unfortunately, was a disappointment. I still think the movie's tremendous. I really like that movie, so far cry from what The Bride is. But yeah, this is certainly a end to that momentum, at least for now. We'll see what happens with the Warner Brothers slate, especially with the upcoming sale to Paramount. But let me know, what did you think of The Bride? Did you find things to appreciate about this movie with low expectations? After low expectations like me, did you completely dislike the movie? Either way, let me know. And for more movie reviews, subscribe. I'll see you next time.